Hello everyone, and welcome to another gameplay analysis video. Today we're going to be looking at my 5th game from the International Championship, which is my 3rd and final 3-player game. Since this is my 5th game, everyone should be familiar here, but I am in first position in this game, rated 1815. In second position is Tordread, rated 1747, and in third position is totsilence, rated 1810. Something to note about these players before we start is that Tordread and I are essentially, at this point in the tournament, tied in our group, or effectively tied in our group, at the top of the leaderboard. totsilence, on the other hand, is basically one step away from relegation. He had completed 4 games to this point and had not gotten any points, so he's in a must-win situation for every game. While I think the main goal for Tordread and I is mostly just to finish at least one place ahead of one another. Now moving on to the game itself, as we look at the leaders and wonders. This time to note is that both theater support and lab support is really present here. There's 3 strong lab leaders, libraries as well, with Meyer, Einstein, and Jobs, all with spaceflight as a supporting wonder, and maybe Darwin leading up into these leaders. For cultural-based leaders, for theater-based leaders, we have Gaudi, Bach, and Shakespeare going into Chaplin, Fleming, and Marlena, with Hollywood as a great wonder to top it off. Sorry, I had a small mention about libraries. Darwin also works really well going into Fleming or Einstein, going in the library route. So basically all the major strategies are supported, except all the major urban buildings are supported, except for arenas with no Pierre in this game. Fast food chains is also a pretty good wonder in this game as well. It's usually always solid, but it's especially better with Ocean Liner and Statue in the game. Extra yellow tokens can make fast food chains much larger. Empire State Building and United Nations are all usually pretty poor wonders, and I think they're even more poor in this game than usual, especially Empire State Building with no gates or watt or some reason to go into oil. Lastly, I think colonization can be okay. It starts off with Sun Tzu and Colossus, and maybe you can colonize pretty well with Barbarossa, but there's no colonization payoff, there's no Cook, there's no Suez, so it would mostly just be getting colonies for colony's sake. There is Mandela at the top end, so if you do have a lot of extra yellow tokens, that could be somewhat of a payoff, but it's not nearly as strong as Suez. Okay, moving on to HA. You can see here I picked Cleopatra here. I think Boudica is generally a little bit more flexible, and I would like to pick her, but Sun Tzu is in the game, and I just don't want to deal with the awkward of that military bonus on the first turn. So I just take the safer choice, even though there's no wonder in the row. This comes at a risk in itself, but I really don't want to put my first population into a warrior. Tordread takes Boudica and Richland, doesn't mind taking the risk, and totsilence rewards that risk by taking Confucius, so mostly all economical leaders on our side. Here you can see that only 2 wonders fell, Stonehenge and Library. I am not going to take one of these wonders for 3CA. I think it's just too much to do on the first turn. So I do risk Tordread and totsilence taking these 2 wonders ahead of me and not having anything to do with Cleopatra in the coming turns. But otherwise, I just do standard actions, take Richland. And then Tordread mostly does standard actions and takes Stonehenge. As for totsilence, takes Confucius, takes Library, builds in line. So both my opponents took wonders, which makes a lot of sense here. And but even though I'm left without a wonder, Alchemy did drop, so I do have something to use for Cleopatra in future turns. And so Alchemy can basically be the first wonder for me. I'm also going to take these Swordsmen here. I see no reason to take Engineering Genius since I have no wonder. So just taking that Age 1 military tech can, it's not a bad thing to take. Tortured Seeds, flips to a settlement, builds a lab, increases population, builds a step on Stonehenge, and takes urban growth. Just being civil action efficient, basically. totsilence Seeds, flips development politics, builds a lab, takes code of laws, takes breakthrough. So doesn't go into consumption here, doesn't increase population, and both Tordread and I have a free population. I have a free population with development settlement. So he could get punished by the event deck if we see. So here, I'm going to see Call to Arms. My plan is I don't have much to do with Cleopatra after these alchemies are built. So my plan is initially I'm just going to go into Nostradamus, and so that's why I see these cult arms here. Flip development of religion. Flip development of religion. That's why totsilence gets a little bit punished, but generally I think it's not a bad thing too much. Go for the alchemy, increase population. Just grab Nostradamus here. I don't mind leaving Engineering Genius 1 for Tordread. Stonehenge doesn't really benefit from that much, so it would be a really long time before this becomes useful anyways. And then I just play the Legion out. I want to keep these strength-based events in my hand with Nostradamus in order to seed them for the extra culture. Tordread seats, flips development markets. I believe he takes the resources. Yeah. Increases population, takes knights, takes engineering genius, and goes for the knights. So it's a nice thing to try to get a little bit stronger here. If I only build something like 1 swordsman next turn, I'll only go up to 3 strength. So Tordread doing this might allow him to choose his bonus next turn as opposed to being forced to go for the military one. Totsilence seats, flips to trade routes. Goes for Code of Laws, finishes library, increase population, just does all of that stuff to get a corruption. Here, I'm going to seed Raiders, I believe. Actually, I don't seed anything. I think my logic is that I can keep it in Nostradamus with Nostradamus as bonus, and there is a strength-based event in Call to Arms, so I'm going to plan on waiting a little bit here. So I don't end up seeding Raiders. I just go for the Swordsman, increase my strength, upgrade the lab, go for Nostradamus here, increase my strength just a little bit beyond to what Tordread can go for, and this makes it so that he has awkwardness just with trying to use his military bonus next turn, since he doesn't have a free population. And then take the breakthrough and irrigation. Tordread goes for alchemy, upgrades and upgrades, and then reveals a phalanx. So couldn't use the military bonus next turn, but he can use it pretty nicely next turn. Totsilence seats, still Confucius, even as the weakest. Tordread and I get lucky with immigration. Well, not lucky, I just mean that Totsilence didn't have the temple, so Tordread and I get it from that free religion. Goes for knights, increase pop, builds a knight, and reveals medieval army. Here I see Raiders. Flip one of the Confucius science events, go for Code of Laws, breakthrough, build finish my Legion, and then take rich land to use for the irrigations later. There is some thought to going for these warfare instead of this rich land, just because I have a good amount of science, and I would like to actually use it. But there's a lot of military actions in 3-player games, and I just don't think it's a necessary take. Alright, Tordread doesn't seed, switches to Barbarossa. Doesn't use the full military bonus, but doing this could potentially leave him with enough food to increase population with Barbarossa next turn. There should be enough cards on the row for the age 1 to still be around by the time it's Tordread's next turn, and then finishes Stonehenge. Totsilence offers open borders to Tordread, accepts, goes for Bread and Circuit, or takes Bread and Circus, goes for Eleanor, takes rich land, and then develops Bread and Circus here. Here, I see border conflicts. My plan is to go for Great Wall, and then with the Legion tactic, have a decent amount of strength and enough happiness to support it all. But I think that Great Wall is probably not a good first wonder overall, so I'm a little bit questionable about this decision. Just because its Great Wall is much more susceptible to Ravage through time, I could go for Himeji instead. That way, it's not so devastating to lose a Happy Face, and all the civil actions it takes to finish Great Wall if Ravage through time happens. So if I were to take this turn back, I would probably go for Himeji as opposed to Great Wall, even though I think Great Wall kind of fits the civilization better. Himeji has the also added benefit of being a much better defensive wonder, and if you plan on playing for a small eco game with like Bach, then something like Great Wall or something like Himeji is a much better defensive wonder in that case. So anyways, I see the open borders, the cultural influence. go for the irrigations, do the step to get out of corruption, increase my production a little bit more. Totsilence seeds, or sorry, Tordread seeds, flips a Confucius event. Builds a knight with Barbarossa, goes for takes iron and just develops it. Just again trying to be civil action efficient. He can start going for it next turn, and then takes for Gallery. Not really much else to take here. I think it's possible that Swordsman is a little bit better of a take. At least that's what I would do. I generally like being a little bit better prepared for H2 tactics, and I just can't see this for Gallery getting used for a long time. So that's just how I would play it. Start of H2. Totsilence seeds is Eleanor, so he's probably going to keep doing that. Seed frequently, even though he's the weakest. Flips Call to Arms, so I'm actually a little bit upset that Call to Arms is the last event in the event deck, so that both my opponents now get H2 draws instead. Takes Culture Influence, takes Swordsman, and this takes just makes sense. It's not really too many interesting things that you can actually take here. So if we look at the Age 1 overview here, you can see that there's not too much different in all of our civilizations. We all have somewhat upgraded science production. The only thing that's really going for me compared to the rest is that I have these irrigations built up already, and I could even increase my resource production if I want to. But otherwise, because we all have that extra science production, like I said, we're all pretty ready to transition to a government pretty easily. So anyways, in my first H2 turn here, I'm actually going to make a big strategic commitment here. I have briefly mentioned the fact that there's a pretty good theater strategy, and I've also mentioned this before in previous videos where I think 3-player games, you don't necessarily need upgraded resource production just because there's many more yellow cards available for all players. I could easily do something like go into Iron here and upgrade and just start spending my resources down that way. Or I can go for drama and hope for a theater-based leader or a culture-based leader with Shakespeare, Gaudy, or Bach. So what I do here is that I take drama, I take printing press, I take reserves, and then I use the rest of my civil action to get out of corruption. But I think that going for this printing press over this bread and circus is a mistake. Printing press sets up a little bit better for Shakespeare, but bread and circus sets up a little bit better for Bach and Gaudy. And the reason I think this is a mistake is because Shakespeare, no matter what happens, even if these buildings become super cheap with his discount, is that population is the biggest bottleneck for this kind of strategy. And in this position, I haven't really gotten any extra yellow tokens. I didn't win any colonies. I didn't win it through any events. I don't have any wonders that provide extra yellow tokens at the moment. So I think that going for somebody like trying to hit for Bach or Gaudy would just be a little bit smarter, a little bit more population efficient, especially because I already have these alchemies built. I don't really need any more science income from printing press. So it would just be better to go for this type of strategy with like 2 dramas or something, and then maybe bread and circus for some supplemental happy faces. Basically, what I do here with this drawing printing press pickup, going for Shakespeare, is that it becomes a much more high variance strategy. I rely on cards more heavily like Ocean Liner and Statue of Liberty. So I should try to lower that reliance on individual cards as much by going for the setup for the other leaders instead. Tordread Seats, flips developed territory, Totsilence wins this. Starts his mine upgrades, takes breakthrough for 2 civil actions, which I think makes sense better than the rich land, probably here. Just because even though the science production is good, it can always be spent down very quickly, especially after a government change. Totsilence Seeds, flips extra science, goes for the iron that I left him, and rebuilds the medieval army. Takes rich land as well. And then here, I have the setup, and I fully commit to this setup, even though I think it's really bad in retrospect. So what I do here, take masonry, finish Great Wall, grab Shakespeare. If I didn't want to go for Shakespeare, I could instead play reserves for food and then take this urban growth. I'm very focused on the fact that my dramas plus printing press combination, if I have both of these developed with Shakespeare, that each pair only costs one resource. But like I said, it's very, very population intensive and is just a much more risky strategy. It can be powerful. It just comes with a lot of costs. George takes Catherine, upgrades a mine, grabs Rifleman, and then just develops Rifleman. George takes Max, takes Republic, does a nice government change here, and is able to get strategy as well. So he's not limited in military actions either. Takes cannons and finishes the last mine upgrade. Here, as my seed, I'm trying to push for border conflict here, and the card that I choose to seed is a little bit controversial. I seed Politics of Strength here, mostly because I think Cold War is a very, very beneficial event. If my opponents get it with only this amount of medium science production, this +6 means a lot more than certain draws sometimes. But that being said, Politics of Strength is also extremely risky extremely risky seed, especially because it's not necessarily expected to flip during Age 2. There's still quite a few cards before the event deck flips, so it's just a controversial pick, and I'm still not sure if it's 100% correct. But I do try to get that border conflict out. Instead, I flip Barbarians, take Constitutional Monarchy, and I grab the Selective Breeding and Urban Growth. So again, this Selective Breeding is another controversial pickup. I obviously already have Irrigation developed, so this is mostly a denial pick for both my opponents. Neither of them have any food solution at the moment. So if I can delay my opponents getting population out, this can also be a way that I can be a little bit safer for longer. That being said, though, there is Ocean Liner in the game as well still, and it might not be worth it trying to spend the civil action to even try to deny population. I could, instead of taking these two cards here, take maybe Engineering Genius and try to set up for a Statue of Liberty later on. Just because, like I said, I need to, a Statue of Liberty or a Ocean Liner later on. Just because, like I said, I need to have more population available to me. Here, Tordread Seeds, flips Raiders. So there is at least one strength event that they got affected by. Takes Engineering Genius and Efficient Upgrade. Then he reveals Conquistadors, which allows him to be stronger than me, and this last card is Border Conflict, so hoping that Silence doesn't seed, but he pushes right into it. I mean, winning Border Conflict was probably about 50-50 between me and Tordread. We were about equal in terms of how often we were strongest. Silence goes for cannons, reveals mobile artillery, and then just grabs Ocean Liner here and reserves. So totsilence came out with a good population solution and has a very efficient and good tactic. So even though he's not threatening at the moment, this kind of extra population with good tactic will be threatening in the long term. Anyways, going on to my turn. Here, I decided to start Shakespeare's things. There is something like Statue on the Row, but I really don't have a lot of resources, so I think it's best to just do these very action inefficient things with my turn. Build Swordsman as well. Take Patriotism, take Frugality, take Cavalryman here. I obviously need the Cavalryman for the classic army that I drew, so I can't really afford to take these reserves here. Frugality is also a little bit better than reserves anyways, just because I don't really have a lot of extra population. This irrigation can only last me so far. It is always fun to look at Shakespeare, though, and see that his pairs only cost one resource. So anyways, Tordread has 2 Engineering Geniuses in hand and a Statue of Liberty on the 1 CA row, so he just goes for that. Really cheap statue, so he's not completely, I didn't, this, the Selective Breeding denial didn't really do that much to either of my opponents. Both of them have really good ways of utilizing their yellow bank. Toss on the seats, flip Scientific Breakthrough, takes and develops Architecture, finishes Ocean Liner, takes Revolution Idea, takes Breakthrough, takes Journalism, and plays his reserves out of hand to build a knight. Here, I honestly did not want to pact with totsilence here. I think that totsilence's civilization is a lot stronger, especially with the ocean liner, whereas Tordread hasn't necessarily fixed his um, food problems yet and doesn't have the greatest production anywhere. But like I said, part of the reason that I do this is at the beginning of the game, Tordread and I are effectively tied, and I don't want to give him any extra boost. So maybe this is wrong because Tot Highlands is so much more threatening overall that these extra resources can come back and target me. But I do make this decision, and I just have to deal with it. I also took the food side of this, just because, like I said, the only thing that Shakespeare really needs is extra population. So any extra 1 or 2 population available will just be stronger for me overall. So here I do Shakespeare things again, and I do make a mistake later on. So I have to play these reserves out first, or else they're going to expire. Go for a cavalryman here, go for a drama, and disband and rebuild a library. So I made the decision to disband a alchemy, and what I was thinking at the time is that I just want to get as much culture production going as much as possible and get away from my opponents. And this is super action efficient, and there are not too many resources that I can grab. But this is a complete mistake, and I had the last 3 civil actions in my turn be build a theater, disband a library, disband a lab, build a library. And always I should take wave nationalism here instead of those 3 civil actions. I was debating a long time between them just because I knew that this type of set was very action inefficient. And in order for me to get more pairs, I need to disband these labs anyways. So this is the big drawback with Shakespeare, like I said earlier, is that I just don't have the population available, and it's really showing already. If I had something like Bach here, I could have I could have these 2 alchemies and maybe just 3 theaters, 3 dramas, just by upgrading this religion out, and then I could spend these population here from my libraries into that bread and circus that I talked about, or another cavalryman in the future. So this kind of civilization, I think, is just a very, very fragile civilization. And especially I denied myself picking up this wave, like I was talking about earlier. With this only 3 resource production, I really need to pick up any yellow cards that give me any extra resources that I can. I was thinking that I am relatively safe in the meantime. With this patriotism, I can still build another cavalryman next turn. But the thing is that I won't have enough resources to build 2 more cavalrymen after that to go for the double classic army. And that might be a break point for me, especially because totsilence can very easily finish an army here, and then because of the extra resources, he doesn't even need anything else to get a 3rd army on top of that. Tordread takes cannons for 3 CA, goes for them, and reveals Napoleonic army here. Tordread flips inhabited, wins this for 8. I thought he had to spend more, but he ends up having a lot of cards here, and he only wins this for this 1 warrior here. I think that if he had to spend any more than just the warrior, it wouldn't really be worth it. So, Totsilence built a cannon, has enough for another army next turn, and I really should have looked into that a little bit more, seeing as he can build another army without extra resources before offering that the international trade agreement with Totsilence. So a little bit of regret to not just offer to Tordread because Totsilence is threatening a full army next turn very easily. So this is the start of H2. I mean, the start of H3. So if we look at the overview, we already kind of know what my strategy is. I have only 1 linear plan. It's to take resources off the row and get my strength up and defend. I have a good amount of culture production compared to my opponents. And then if we look at Totsilence's plan, we've already talked about that as well. He also has 1 linear plan. His plan is to break me or just get stronger. He doesn't have any culture production infrastructure, and honestly, he doesn't have a big economy either, so it would be really hard to build a lot of those urban buildings as well. And then Tordread, he is kind of in the middle of both of us. Basically, if a war plan happens, it's gonna probably happen from totsilence, and it's almost always gonna hit me, just because of the dynamics of the game. So I think the game becomes extremely linear here, and it's more or less up to fate. If I am in this position with this type of culture production and I get Air Force, I'll probably win most of the time. But if I don't get Air Force, I'm probably going to lose every single time. So anyways, you saw that I did seed here. I actually completely forgot that I had Politics of Strength in the deck. If I had taken this back again, sorry, if I had to do this turn again, I would never seed in this position because I'm going to get stronger on this turn. So I get hit by the Politics of Strength, so that was the reality check that reminded me that I forgot about it. I did see Prosperity because the extra happy. I have a lot of happy faces, so the extra food is always nice, but I don't need to seed it here. I could have seeded it on my next turn, and it would still have made the next deck. So here, I just grab some stuff, go for Strength, grab the resources off the row. I have a decent amount of science, so I am willing to spend it down like this. Like I said, the only thing that I really need science for is Air Force, and failing Air Force, the only thing I would need science for afterwards is military theory. Tordread doesn't seed, goes for selective breeding, and stays a little bit weaker than me. But totsilence, I'm much more fragile. I'm very, very fragile here, and with that Politics of Strength as well, probably had a war, and this is from H2, so it's not even from that. So War over Territory hits for 34. So the thing is like, this War over Territory, then totsilence just takes a bunch of revolutionary ideas and a bunch of cards afterwards. I'm not sure if that taking all these cards is correct. I think maybe Spaceflight is probably overall going to be the best wonder. Even if it's relatively small now, it tends to be the bigger wonder. Although I can see Fast Food Chains being a little bit better. But it's available on the 1 CI slot, and there were a lot of cards that didn't need to be taken, like this Oil, Urban Growth, Revolutionary Idea could have been passed up. Anyways, so what I was thinking here is, I'm not sure how much I actually need to defend. War over Territory, after this population increase, if I lose 1, 2, or 3 yellow cubes, it doesn't really matter too much since my yellow bank is almost completely exhausted anyways. Irrigation can't get me any farther for the most part. And then the Prosperity that I have seeded in here might give me 1 more population afterwards. So I really can only increase population twice more anyways. So I spent a good amount of time figuring out how much I need to defend. I do want to note here that if I had an extra wave of nationalism here, I could I could defend extremely hard with double classic army. But I'm assuming if totsilence saw that as a possible option for me, he wouldn't go for this war. And then one more thing is I can disband extremely heavily and actually go up to 35 strength here. I can build 2 more cavalry, and 1 more swordsman, and with classic army that actually brings me up to 35. But it requires extremely heavy disbands, and I would just basically have no infrastructure left, no regular infrastructure left. So I weigh the benefits of trying to defend for so hard that I actually win an extra yellow token, meaning I could probably increase population an additional time. Especially because if I want to disband something like these libraries, I can actually rebuild them for free. But I end up going the route of not defending too hard. totsilence doesn't really need extra yellow bank anyways with Ocean Liner, so his he doesn't really benefit too much from it, and I don't really hurt too much from it. So I end up trying to defend in a pretty, I guess, minimal way. First off, here I make another mistake here. I see Cold War. I actually was trying to fish for economic progress here. For some reason, I thought it would give me enough resources to fulfill a second classic army if I wanted to, but it actually ended up being 1 resource short anyways, so it wouldn't really matter. Anyways, increased population. I built a theater here. Like I said, I'm going to defend pretty minimally, and I just go up to 29. You can very easily see that I could go up another 3 strength here, but it comes at the cost of not grabbing this patriotism. Of course, I didn't need to increase population and build a theater here, but if I didn't increase population, then I would be under corruption anyways. So I thought if I lost 2 resources while only a 3 resource production, it just wouldn't really be beneficial to take yellow cards as well. So with my last 3 civil actions, I take patriotism and professional sports. I think that pro sports can be another way that I need strength. If I don't get Marlena anytime soon, I can disband this temple into pro sports to deal with my unhappiness solution. It's certainly not my preferred way, but it is an option. Anyways, Tordread, on his turn, Air Force comes down, and he grabs it immediately. Grabs reserves, finishes a second Napoleonic army. Then on Totsilence's turn, Air Force comes down, and he grabs it immediately. Oh, sorry. First he cedes, flips economic progress. Air Force comes down, takes Einstein, builds up an army a little bit more, blah, 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 grabs Air Force. Okay, so both my opponents have Air Force, and Totsilence is set up for another war for 57 here. It's not so bad that he got Air Force as much as it is that he got it at this turn. If I had another turn to prepare, I could maybe threaten 3 classic armies and deter a war. But the thing is I just don't have enough population. So the fact that my opponents can build their armies more efficiently with Air Force means I have to defend in a very, very inefficient manner if a war happens. So I do expect the war to happen. The politics of strength did happen in H3. So it's just something I really have to deal with. But I don't really have much else to do besides take as many resources as I can. So on my turn, first off, this cancel doesn't really matter. I just can't get any more population out anyway, so it doesn't matter. Go for the pro sports, deal with my happiness this way. Don't need to save my science anymore. And then I just grab reserves and military buildup. So I grab as many resources as I can, but I cannot threaten triple classic army anyways, no matter how this is cut. Even if I skip on this reserves and disband preemptively, I still can't do it even with Marlena. So I just do what I can. Tordread seeds, flips refugees, grabs Mandela, grabs pro sports, goes for those. Next turn can still go for 2 Air Force next turn, so it's definitely not going to be a target. And then Totsilence goes for a war against me, and grabs fast food chains, which is pretty much the only relevant wonder left in the game. So at this point, Totsilence is pretty much just going to win, and it's up to me to see if I can hold on to this culture gap that I have between me and Tordread. So here, I go for military buildup, disband a bunch, finish out an army, build a little bit more. I could technically defend a little bit more. Instead of grabbing Marlena, I could go with patriotism, disband something, build another cavalry, but doesn't really matter since I lose the culture anyway. I lose the culture income anyways. So I just defend for 50 instead of like 53. Tordread doesn't cede, grabs a bunch of resources, grabs enough to get stronger. And then Totsilence cedes, flips terrorism, which is like final nail in the coffin for me. It makes it really, really difficult for me to defend because he destroys my arena. And I haven't like drawn very many cards, so I do feel like I can't even threaten the defense very easily with only 50. So I just try to get stronger, and I'm not even sure if that's correct or not. I just get stronger enough after electing Marlena to actually defend aggressions if I need to. So I have to disband my libraries to do so. You can see here that my impacts are going to be terrible. I have no infrastructure at all. This is pretty much all I can do. But I do have some culture gap in between me and Tordread, about a 20 or so lead. But Totsilence didn't even destroy Tordread's pro sports last turn, so he only destroyed a alchemy. So I expect bad things to happen in the event deck based on that. And then Totsilence seeds, plus prosperity, finishes fast food chains, and ends up kind of in a closest situation, but I have no impacts in. I have a little bit over 20-point lead against Tordread, so I just hoping that I can hold on for the most part. First impact is Impact Wonders. Pretty much everything's going to be bad for me. It's all depending on how much gap I can hold. Impact Balance, bad for everybody, which is pretty funny. This is one of the lowest impact balances I've ever seen. Impact Variety, it's actually not too bad for me. Would have been a little bit better if I didn't have to disband so much. And Impact of Strength. So this is a really big loss for me. And then Impact of Agriculture. Tordread built a farm last turn, so this is probably his, which is enough to catch up and bring you down to third place. So, congrats to totsilence for winning this game. This allows him to stay alive for the group at the time. Shortly after this game finished, though, totsilence didn't take first in one of his later games, so he is going to end up being relegated from this group, even after his great results in this game. As for a game overview, I do want to cover some things that I make. I think that it was a strategic mistake to play for Shakespeare instead of something like Bach or Gaudi. I think the Shakespeare strategy variance was too high compared to the other two, and it caused my civilization to be even more fragile than my opponent's. Shakespeare is also more civil action intensive, so if I had a better setup with the alchemies, with the science income, with better civil action efficiency, I could have had more resources or better techs, and maybe I could have defended wars with higher level techs as opposed to having to rely on so much population into my classic armies. So, like, I actually have, even though this looks really silly, I actually have 17 population overall. It just so happens that 11 of it has to be in cavalrymen and swordsmen. If I didn't need to be so population inefficient, maybe my overall civilization would be a lot more balanced. Right now, it's just total destruction all throughout. So what I have to say about this is that my civilization coming into H3 after the H2, even though I had such high culture production, it was too fragile. My civilization is too fragile, and it has too much of a reliance on Air Force. If I had played a different leader, a different strategy, in a more solid manner for my civilization, I think that I could have come up with a lot more points, been able to defend more efficiently, and then maybe I could have still won this game, just because those wars would not be as not as devastating. Although the point swing wasn't so big, it's really the damage that happened in its wake that really sealed the deal. Anyways, looking at my group overall, I do want to show off that there's quite a bit. This is the last game that I showed you guys for the results, but there's been quite a few games that have finished since my last video. You can see here that Lambda won a game, Tordread won a game, Lambda won another, totsilence won this one, and then 2 more games finished after this game completed. We can see Sectat won one, and then totsilence took a second here, which put him into relegation no matter what. Overall, the standings of my group. We can see here that Martin is temporarily going to be at top. He ended up doing very well in the games I didn't play against him. He took 3 firsts and a second, although one of those firsts was tied. All these thirds came from the games that I was in. Not that I had anything to do with them. It's just that that's how it turned out. It's pretty funny. And then as for the remaining players, you can see that Tordread, Lambda, Sectat, and I are kind of in a fight for the remaining, or for the top spot. It's pretty messy at this point, but totsilence and Fiantark are completely guaranteed to be relegated. Anyways, with the International Championship coming to a close soon and my remaining games almost done, I hope to see you in the next video.